Hey everybody, this is So Many Sequels. I'm Josh.
I'm Andrew.
I'm Garrett.
And I'm David.
Today on the show we are finishing up the Star Wars. Nope, I wish. Nope, Star Trek. Star Trek. We're finishing up the Next Generation films. So today we're talking about Star Trek Nemesis. Like I said, the final movie starring the Next Generation cast. It's kind of their send-off for a while. This movie came out in 2002, starring, the usual suspects, but also a very, very young Tom Hardy in from what I could gather, was his first real starring role.
Mm-hmm.
He plays the lead villain in this film, whereas previously he'd only done a couple things, and I think he was kind of a background guy. So Star Trek Nemesis, if nothing else, gave us Tom Hardy in a way. How people feel about that, I don't know. He's okay.
Tom Hardy was hot for a bit.
I like him
Tom
in some
Hardy's
things.
hot all of the time. Thank you.
Really,
Oh,
you guys still
geez.
big on Tom Hardy?
No, I
No,
just
I'm
mean
not.
physically.
I just mean he was in
find him
movies like
attractive.
left and right in the mid to late 2000s.
I remember movies.
I was literally just talking about physically. People find him very attractive.
We'll have to talk about one of my favorite unintentional Star Trek crossovers later in the movie or later in the review. But we'll get to it. It's another Tom Hardy movie.
So, yeah, like I said, this movie came out in 2002. It was a December flick, directed by Stuart Baird, which, if this gives you any indication of how this movie went, was the last time he ever made a movie.
Right.
I did not know that.
He never made a movie again.
What were his other credits before this?
1996's Executive Decision.
Great movie.
And 1998's U.S. Marshals.
See, that's something you need to apologize for, Andrew.
For knowing that?
For knowing whatever the hell you just said was in 1996.
Executive Decision.
6 people know that movie.
That's apparently why they went with
Now-
him on this, is that Executive Decision and U.S. Marshals were both fairly well liked for their action components. And they
Now-
wanted to put a bit more action in this Star Trek movie.
Credit where it's due, we have run into Stuart Baird before in a way that we did not realize. He's more well known as an editor, and was nominated for an Academy Award for his work editing Superman. So we've covered Superman, obviously. It was a great
Superman
series
the first
to
one.
cover. Yeah, Superman, the motion picture, the movie, whatever they called it.
Wow.
He edited that movie and was nominated for an Academy Award for that work.
Wow, it's an extensive career.
Yeah. But he went back to editing after Nemesis. He didn't direct again. Some other movies that we've heard that we'll have heard of that he's edited. One day we will talk about these movies. He edited Casino Royale and Skyfall.
Oh, well, there you go. So his
Well-
his career did not go away altogether.
Longtime listeners will know that this season was supposed to open with, or not open, but we were leading into the Daniel Craig Bond films pre-coronavirus. So now I don't know that we'll get to see that movie this year. I'm really not sure.
November.
Uncertain.
That's
Who has a magic 8-ball?
He also edited Green Lantern
All signs point to no.
and
Yikes.
the 2018 Tomb Raider reboot. So
I never saw that, but I was curious.
Alicia Vikander, is that the one?
yes, it's fairly inoffensive. It's not like a great movie. I wouldn't watch it again probably, but I enjoyed it for what it was. I mean,
It wasn't
Alicia
like hot
Vikander-
garbage or anything.
it wasn't hot garbage. Alicia Vikander is a pretty good Lara Croft. Walton Goggins, I love him in everything he does.
Yeah, he's captivating.
there. So, but as much as I would rather talk about literally any of those movies, we have to talk about Star Trek Nemesis. So I'll go ahead. This movie's 20-ish years old almost. So,
You want to describe the story a little bit?
yeah, that's what I was gonna do.
Yeah.
I was just gonna give a brief spoiler warning because this movie has a legitimate spoiler. If a couple
I thought you were
legitimate
going.
spoilers, but so if you don't want to be spoiled, I guess go away. But if you don't, so Riker and Troy are married.
Mm-hmm.
He's about to ship off on his own, but a mysterious figure known as Praetor Shinzan appears, and it is revealed that he is a clone of Jean-Luc Picard.
Gasp.
JLP.
Gasp. Also, the Enterprise crew finds another android created by Dr. Soong, who is the creator of Data. This is the third android they've ever found. Well, no, the second they've found. So there's Data, there's Lore from the television show, and this is B4.
And Lore is essentially evil Data.
Yeah.
And B4 is essentially baby Data.
Right. So it's got a kind of interesting dynamic of you've got this other Data and this other Picard. And basically, you know, Picard versus Picard. That's the battle that goes down. So it's got well, the reason this movie makes me the angriest, I think, is because it has what should be a good story, and they still ruined it. Because I love the idea of it, and the scene where Shinzan basically reveals to Picard that he is his clone without saying it, and is in like, here, take my blood. Like, that scene was good. Tom Hardy was creepy and intimidating in that particular moment. He kind of loses it later on, in my opinion, but he's a scary dude at that point. And you're like, what is going on? Because you don't know what's going on. And Picard looks pissed off.
Yeah.
He looks mad as hell. And you don't want to make him mad as hell. I honestly think that's all the positives I can say.
Okay.
I thought the idea of the story was good, and I thought Tom Hardy had moments, and Patrick Stewart is great all the time, but oof, that movie was bad. So I guess let's go around and kind of you guys can give your thoughts now that I've given mine. I believe David's the only one who had seen this. Andrew and Garrett had not seen it.
Right.
Which is surprising to me because Andrew has seen all of them up until now.
Yeah.
So I actually think I want to hear from Andrew first.
Yeah, I do want to hear from Andrew too.
What do you think?
I think it was an interesting concept.
Mm-hmm.
I liked the duality of the possibility of like a good Picard versus an evil Picard.
Yep.
And I took that away from pretty much all of it. And it's also, the movie deals with a lot of duality, because you have, I just said Picard, but we also have Data. You know, there's two Data. I mean, technically there's two Datas in this.
More or less.
Yeah, more or less, yeah. And one has a learning curve, one is the respected officer. And as far as the idea of the movie is concerned, it was a good idea. Poorly executed. Other than that, it's just, I don't know. It's the send off to the Next Generation film series that we should not have got.
Yeah, it's a send off we didn't deserve. What's the important
question for Andrew, because I have a bet going with myself. Did you like this more or less than Insurrection?
I'm kind of indifferent.
It's not an answer.
But
you gotta like one better than the other. Come on.
It's not an answer.
Okay. I would have to say I like this a little bit more.
I knew it. You're wrong. You were so
yesterday.
wrong. Oh, I knew you were going to like this one more.
Why, though?
Because he's predictable.
Because
Garrett's
it doesn't make sense.
No,
Garrett's
because
give this a terrible review and then give it 3.5 stars at the end.
This one's going to be bad all the way around. He's hated Insurrection for so long that even watching it, I think that you two, Josh and David, walked away thinking that movie was better than you remember. It wasn't great, but it was better than you remembered. It wasn't as bad as you remember. Andrew was the only one that had the opinion that it was still bad. And so I knew that going into this, that nothing was going to change his opinion on Insurrection, and that he was going to like this one more because of how much he hated Insurrection.
I think
and going into this, there was absolutely no way that he was going to like this less than Insurrection.
You got ousted, boy.
Hey, I'll take it.
Garrett's in your head.
Well,
He knows that.
He's living in there rent free, but he wants out.
I do. Oh my God, it's the worst.
well, I mean, like,
Trying to get
Really?
would I ever watch this again? No, I don't really care for it. It doesn't do anything for me. It doesn't.
But you had a better time watching this movie than you did Insurrection? For
I had a
real?
better time watching this because this was completely new.
Oh my God.
This was completely new to me. And it's
Doesn't
like,
mean it's better.
it doesn't make it better, but like, I don't know. The idea and the concepts were good. I like the ideas and the concepts better than the last one. So,
My eyes are gonna twitch.
Your response is bad. You have a bad
Well,
response to this.
you know what? You know what? Fuck it. I'm gonna own up to it.
Ooh.
That's my opinion. I'm sticking to it.
All right.
I'm going to call this movie Michael
Stan
Jackson because it's bad, y'all.
Bang.
Bad.
What
I
does
don't
it
know if
Garrett
it's
think?
Michael Jackson
Big-
bad.
It's
I'm gonna call this Leroy Brown because it's bad.
nobody
Leroy Brown.
Nobody knows what it was.
Baddest man in the whole dang town. Yeah, I got you.
No, this was bad. It was boring. Nothing happened except for that one scene where Tom Hardy revealed that he was a clone. Outside of that, absolutely nothing happened. Josh and I were watching this with another friend of ours who literally left because she was so bored. She was like, I'm going to leave, guys. You have fun. It drove her away because it was so damn boring. And realistically, the only reason I stayed is because I had to.
It's really aggressively boring.
It's awful.
We must have checked the runtime about a dozen times throughout it.
Yep. And every time an hour had passed, but realistically, it was like 10 minutes. 10 minutes had gone by, but it felt like an hour. This movie is, I think, the longest one. It's almost
Yeah,
2.
it's like right at 2 hours.
Yeah, and it was 2 hours too long. It shouldn't have. I remember this movie coming out. I remember seeing the trailer, and I remember thinking, this looks really good. The trailer made it look really cool, it looked really creepy. It was none of those things.
We all need to start remembering to watch trailers for these movies before we watch the movie,
I agree.
so that we can see how it's marketed before we see it, and
Yeah.
then be able to talk about that. Because I have no doubt that the trailer made it look awesome. Trailers always do that.
Yep, it looked really good.
Yeah, we could do retro reactions.
Yeah,
These old trailers.
I like that.
Yeah, I have nothing memorable about this movie. Nothing stands out. There's absolutely nothing about this movie that should be recognized or considered. It should be straight forgotten.
Wow. And when did you guys watch it? Last night?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I
As
watched
in
it.
this recording, yeah.
I watched it a week ago.
Oh my.
You've had time to let it stew.
Mm-hmm.
I hope it didn't though. I hope it left your mind.
Oh, well, in places it did. Do you want me to go now?
Yeah,
Yeah,
go
I'm
ahead.
done.
We've all gone.
Okay. All right.
Loved it.
It's not as bad as I remember. It's really not. It's not nearly as awful as most people give it credit for. This movie is credited with killing the franchise, but the reason that happened was because nobody went to see this movie. This movie,
That's true.
This movie made next to nothing compared to all the other movies, and there's 5, 6, 7 different reasons you could accredit that to. But here's what I'll say: it is stunningly lackluster in terms of what they wanted this movie to do. That said, here's what I appreciate about it. It's darker tone. It's a very new kind of villain that we've seen because we're getting the Romulans, which we've never seen in the films before. And you're getting a bit of like what feels like a closure for a lot of the characters, send off for a lot of the characters, but it also feels really half-hearted, all of the goodbyes, because like everybody involved, the actors the director, the writers, even a lot of the people that the producers who have quotes here in like the various articles about this movie, all say there was another movie planned after this, but the box office performance pulled the plug on that. So I was so confused as to why they would go through all the effort of having Riker and Troy get married and go off to a new ship. Dr. Crusher's getting a new job. Here's that spoiler alert for you. Killing off Data. Like, half the cast is gone. What was the plan for the next movie?
Well, they bring
all you
Data
got left is
back in a
Picard,
half-hearted
Geordi, and
way.
Worf.
They bring Data back in a half-hearted way. Had they done another movie, B4 would have just been Data.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
there would have been no evidence that was B4. He would have been fully developed as Data, and that's the way they would have done it, because that's the way they.
And I have no doubt about that. I have
Which
no
is a
doubt
BS thing to do.
That's why
if
they
you're going
did
to
it.
kill
was to
somebody,
leave
stick with it and kill somebody.
I have no doubt that's why they did it, to leave themselves that potential. But it's just so confusing as to why you would think, hey, let's have a whole bunch of very heartfelt goodbye moments and clearly a sign that we're done, while we're also pre-production for a sequel. What were they thinking?
Well,
like,
and what's
if they had
go
if
on.
they had written this and marketed this and planned for this to be a swan song finale and written a story that really played to that, then this would be great. Unfortunately, it's story-wise about as interesting as what we got in Insurrection, and doesn't feel like it should be the last story, the last story, quote unquote. It just doesn't feel like it fits. I love the idea of Picard struggling with basically the idea of nature versus nurture, that if he had grown up the way Shinzon grew up, that he, as a person in his heart, would have turned out to be a monster. And that the only reason he didn't was because he had a fairly good life as a child and and growing up and went to Starfleet and all that. He's looking at this and saying, am I really capable of being this tyrannical and a monster? And here's more or less an answer staring back at him. Yeah, if you'd grown up the way that this guy grown up, you're capable of that. And the truth of that question bearing out that we're all capable of that. Like, under different circumstances, we all could have been wildly different people. And so, like, the philosophical debate coming in of being like, well, part of it is how you're brought up, but a big part of it is the choices you make. All that, all great, all very Star Trek-y way to tell a story. But that's not necessarily, I think, the best story to tell if your other foot is on, let's do a good send-off for some of our characters. So, like, it's lackluster as a finale, as a finish. I don't know why they wrote it the way they did. I like a lot of the other aspects. This would have been a good story if they wanted to say, hey, here's your story. Next year we got another big one coming out, and they don't release this when they released it, and it do terrible. So I like Picard. Patrick Stewart's great as always. Tom Hardy's really good. I like the car chase scene at the beginning. Sue me. I like that, and I like the. Honestly, the movie probably should have been like 15 minutes longer.
What?
There are some great deleted scenes. You guys have got to see some of these deleted scenes. Some of them provide so much more actual character development than what we get in the movie.
I'll concede that some of the deleted scenes should be added in, but equal time should be taken for what is added.
Yeah, you make this movie longer, I cut myself.
Pretty much,
that's the way that works.
Pretty much the entire boring, pretty much the entire pointless fight between Riker and Ron Perlman's character should be taken out. All of that was pointless. Like,
I want the Will Wheaton scenes to be put back in.
Into that with Troy getting the better of that guy. That's all that has to happen there. We don't need to have Riker trying to go and fight that guy.
Yeah.
Like, that's all pointless.
I agree.
But if you've never seen the deleted scene, Josh, for the actual ending, because they have like an actual ending where Picard comes out and he meets his new first officer, and then they get their first mission. It's great. I don't want to spoil it, but it's like, it's a great last. It would have been a great last line for Patrick Stewart's character and for the TNG cast.
Does it make it so number one?
No. You want me to tell you?
I don't care.
Okay.
You ask the other two people who are fans of this franchise, like legitimate fans.
It's a good deleted scene. You just look up Picard's chair or something like that. I think will probably be the name of the deleted scene. But it would have been a great way to finish. And they could have devoted a little bit more time to developing the heart of this story, and maybe taken out a little bit of the action scenes, taken out a little bit of the sort of more unnecessary conversations that I felt were there.
I don't even know. I had something and I just forgot. Like the rest of this movie, I just forgot it.
So I'm gonna do some speculating, probably a little bit, but I wanted to talk about Data. My understanding was that in one of the previous films, either Insurrection or First Contact, I don't recall, Brent Spiner, the actor who plays Data, wanted Data to die, and they told him no. I think it was Insurrection because I believe I remember reading that they said wait till the next one. And so it's my understanding that it was the actor's wish for the character to die.
And I think it makes sense.
But
for
why
him to end up in there?
I agree, but he didn't, because he chose to continue playing B4,
Yeah, he
which
left
we know
himself
that would have left him still returning for the next movie should it happen. He also went on to play Data's creator, Dr. Soong, in Star Trek Enterprise, and he's returned in Star Trek Picard. So, like, why did you want your character to die, guy? You clearly were not done.
At the time of Insurrection, I read this quote. I had this quote pulled up last week. He said it was because he felt like he was aging out of the role.
And I agree with
aged
that.
out of the role at this point.
Well, it's hard to maintain your look when you're an android who doesn't age, but you're a human who does.
Right.
Because you can tell, like,
oh yeah,
Data is clearly older. I wish they had just found a way to explain that with technobabble.
Even they have in the past. Like, there's episodes of the show, I think, where he mentions that Dr. Soong developed a software within him that mimics aging. So, like, he can, like, over time, his skin, for like his synthetic skin, will start to show signs of wear and aging, but it's going to be way prolonged compared to that of a human person. Human.
Can I ask you guys a question about the TV show?
Go ahead.
Sure.
Do the women have anything to do in the TV show?
Plenty.
Then why is this the only movie in the 3 movies that we've had, the only movie where the women have had anything to do? Tori, this is the first time. I was telling Josh and our other friend, I don't think that they have said the women's names in these movies outside of maybe like a handful of times. I was not confident in either of their names outside of the fact that I knew Dr. Crusher because of Wesley. But like, I don't know her first name, Dr. Crusher. That's what I know her as. I did not know the counselor's name until this movie because she actually had something to do. And I think that's a problem with these movies, is that these women have absolutely no point in any of them. And I find that's awful if they actually like do things in the show, because again, I've not seen it, but if they have parts to play in the show, how are they so incredibly neglected in all of these movies?
I'll tell you what, this might be a weird sign of the times kind of thing too. On the show, on any TV show, you have way more leeway to have multiple character arcs and character stories that are focused on different characters different weeks. There are some episodes of the show that are super Worf heavy. Compared to the show, Worf is like a right there with the female characters in terms of like no real point of even being there.
I agree.
There are some episodes that are like all about Worf. There are some episodes that are all about Geordi. There are some episodes, there are plenty of episodes that are all about Picard or Data or Riker, but these movies, by and large, just push Picard and Data to the forefront of these are the two. Basically, these are your 2 characters, and everybody else is just support staff.
Right, they're the Kirk and Spock of this show.
So I would say it's hardly just the women, but unfortunately for their characters, they seem to suffer the most because they don't even really get at times as much to do as Geordi and Worf and Riker.
Yeah.
So I couldn't tell you why, other than the fact that filmmaking of the 90s and early 2000s was still, at least in terms of action films, still very much a male-dominated line of thinking.
Well, and then
That's my guess.
my other question regarding the cast of this or the crew is at this point in time, and I don't know the timeline, so I could be wrong, but at this point in time, isn't Worf already a captain of his own ship? Why is he always there?
Well, this movie came out a few years after Deep Space Nine ended, and yeah, he does have his own ship. I think they try to casually explain that by just having him being there for some event. Like, I think because it's because it's Riker and Troy's wedding in this scenario. It's Riker and Troy's wedding, so he came for that, and he just happens to be up on the ship when everything goes down.
Gotcha.
Why he's allowed to just start serving as the
the
chief of security.
It's almost like they just ignore the fact that he's a captain at this in these movies, and it's just like, just bring him back.
What's funny to me is that an interesting parallel is that in Generations, one of the reasons that I read that George Takei said he would not return was because Sulu was a captain of his own ship and it would not make any sense for him to be there. And he stood by that and did not appear in the movie.
Yeah.
Because he was like, because they wanted him at the helm. And he was like, why would Sulu be at the helm? He's his own captain. Yep. You just want him there to serve under Kirk one more time, and I'm not gonna do that. So it's kind of the same thing with Worf, except Michael Dorn just agreed to do it. Which is fine, but
we looked a little at this kind of stuff, not really as in depth here as we are now, but when Garrett and I did a brief podcast about TV shows becoming movies, and it is a problem, I think, in general, where you sort of make that leap that some characters don't really get as much of the spotlight as they do in the show.
That's the problem with an ensemble show becoming a film. You can't make room for everyone, but it is telling that they specifically chose to kind of ignore both of the only two women who are in the main cast.
But if you're going, for me, if you're going into
more of a story here, but
they do, she gets an opportunity. But for me,
still
it's
not
one of
really.
those where if you're making an ensemble show into a movie, you have the opportunity, you're going to make multiple movies, put the other people that were not highlighted as part of the problem in the next movie. Give them all an opportunity to do something. I talked about, in my opinion, and you could all probably disagree with me, but in my opinion, Insurrection had the most opportunity for people to shine for various different things. The women still didn't really get a chance to shine, other than they talked about how they were excited their boobs were firming up more. But in Insurrection, more people had an opportunity to do something and be a part of something. Whereas the first two movies were focused on Picard and Data, with Geordi kind of having a little bit more, and Riker was there too. But like, you could have had an opportunity for like something to include Dr. Crusher. I mean, she's, in my opinion, the one that like got the shaft every movie. Except for the fact that she was leading around Alfred Woodard's character in First Contact. But you have all of these previous stories, I'm sure, that you could have worked in some way, shape, or form to make them more a part of the plot and feel like they're getting something out of it. Because if I were any of those secondary characters and I saw these movies, I would be livid. Be like, we were as much part of the show as anybody else for 7 years, and we have absolutely nothing to do in 4 movies. I'd be furious.
I think
it's almost a bit of a metaphor, probably unintentional, that Dr. Crusher's first appearance on film, she is literally shoved off of the ship. I don't think they intended that, but it's quite telling.
Yeah,
she is. Data shoves her off the ship into the holographic water so that Data can be, I am Data, and I am the star of this show.
Yep.
Right. It's and it's something that I feel like if they were developing it today, like if they were to do a reboot series of this particular these characters, they would probably give a little bit more attention to all the other characters, because I feel like you got a little bit more with Chekhov and Scotty and even Sulu in these new Star Trek movies than we really got in a lot of the early ones. I mean, I'll have to go back and rewatch those ones and kind of compare and contrast more, but you know, like, look, if we can manage like 30 something heroes in the Avengers movies, I feel like we can handle like 7 principal characters in a Star Trek movie.
You're right. I just remembered one thing that I do really like about this movie, and it's very small, but it
Right.
is freaking Admiral Catherine Janeway.
Janeway.
Yep.
Yep.
Love
was a
that.
really cool little.
Love that a lot. I want
love
a
that she's-
Janeway movie.
She's really familiar when she talks to Picard. She's like, well, the Romulans, the Sona, the Klingons, you just get all the fun stuff, Picard. And he's like,
I wish that they could have made Voyager movies. I would have been
Yeah.
all over that.
yeah, and they had it was great to get that cameo there. And obviously we had the Doctor and we had Neelix in First Contact. I am a little sad now that I'm further along in Deep Space Nine and enjoying more of it that we never got our Deep Space Nine cameos. They filmed a Quark cameo for Insurrection, but it got cut.
Oh, I didn't know
So
that.
bit of a bummer that not all the shows managed to get a moment on the big screen, but glad to see
Yeah.
Admiral Janeway. If you never watched Voyager, it is by far one of the weirder and more fun of the Star Trek canon.
Yes. I
And,
tell everyone to start there.
Apparently a mess and set several times during production. So
Don't care. It's my favorite.
I
Come
didn't
fight me.
realize- anyway,
I know
well-
that's not a popular thing to say. I don't care. Come fight me.
Oh, I love it. I used to watch it every night on UPN.
Yes.
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 SmackDown would end, Voyager would start.
UPN 41.
DM.
Uh,
So yeah, that was my favorite thing.
Yeah, talk, Andrew. You've been silent for an hour and a half.
He's been contemplating how to defend this movie.
no, the only thing I'll say is that like I'm happy that the Romulans kind of played a role in this.
Me
Because,
too.
Because like,
Yeah.
the Romulans throughout these movies have been like it's really just about the Klingons. Like the Klingons are like almost like the main enemy of Starfleet. We see the Romulans, but we never
Only
really,
in the old series.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But,
this
like,
is the first
not-
time in any of the movies the Romulans have been.
Exactly. And they're
Involved.
kind of one of the big baddies of the show.
Yes. and they always talk about like how Romulans are bad and how Romulans are bad, and it's just like, well, let's characterize them, because I think in the entire series here we've only seen the Romulans like once, and they were dead.
So here's a question as a non-fan that I'm going to piggyback off of that.
Sure.
I know from watching this movie that the Romulans were included in this, but I genuinely do not feel like they played a part in this movie.
They didn't really.
I don't.
No, they
I think I know they were there, and I know that they kind of talked about them. But to say that you're happy about them being included is kind of sad, in my opinion. Like, I get why you're saying that because you want to see them there, but like, I don't feel like they served any purpose. The
Well,
main villain was
yeah.
Shinzon, who is not a Romulan, and his Ron Perlman Viceroy, who I don't think is a Romulan. Right?
No.
That's not a
They
Romulan.
are-
The
they are
people at the
Remans.
beginning were in the Senate were the Romulans, and
Mm-hmm.
then they basically disappeared until 3/4 of the way in when that woman showed back up, and she's the only Romulan that I remember seeing throughout the rest of this movie. And then she turned and helped Picard. So
Right.
like they served no point, no purpose. They did not seem to be bad to me at all.
No, but the presence is really there because
Yeah.
it does all stemming from their society. The idea, and I don't think they've ever actually shown Remus or the Remans before for this movie, but you get this idea that the Romulans have been more or less subjugating these people for like thousands of years, and this is like their big coup d'état, and the person leading them is this human clone of Picard. So it's all a little weird. Like they wanted to have the Romulans, but they were kind of afraid of going full on with it, which is confusing. The whole thing about Romulans is that they are sort of an analogy for ancient Rome, and they're like I can never really remember what the exact canon explanation is, but they're very closely tied to the Vulcans. And the Vulcans themselves have never really played a big part in the TNG storylines. But like, there's a real opportunity here to kind of like use that. And you're right. Other than showing us the Romulan Senate at the beginning, it's very much about this group of, I don't know, for lack of a better word, minority aliens that they've been taking advantage of all these years, sort of rising above them. And then the lone Romulan left really in the movie is this woman who kind of makes the decision to side with Picard and the Federation, which is a pretty big decision for a Romulan when you consider they've been having a Cold War for like 90 years. Yeah. It's interesting that going forward, the beginning of J.J. Abrams' Star Trek is still considered in this Prime universe. And Romulus is, after this point, destroyed. So Romulus, seems to have been on the mend, maybe with the Federation. That this was like their entire political government been wiped out at the beginning of this movie. So like, they're really as a society, they're kind of hurting, and then their whole planet gets destroyed. So
the beginning of this movie was basically Star Wars, y'all.
Yeah, I was going to ask you to talk about that because you identified it the most. We didn't know if there's any kind of intention to this or not, but Garrett had noticed that it in moments felt eerily similar to the Phantom Menace, I think.
Yeah, they had it opened up with people pleading to a Senate that was ruling over everything. The Senate made this big, massive decision, and that's what everybody had to preach to. We talked about the fact that viceroys were also in Star Wars. So it seemed like instead of, and this is just like bits and pieces in my opinion. Like, I don't think the whole thing was like super Star Warsian, but I think that in 2002, obviously, Star Wars, and Star Wars has always been more like in the mainstream as far as like the general masses than Star Trek. But I feel like they were trying to incorporate a lot of different elements from Star Wars into this movie to make it more palatable to people who weren't familiar with Star Trek, but maybe Star Wars. And they were trying to put those kinds of elements in there as these are things that we can play on and be like, oh, it's connectable. And I can kind of relate to certain elements of this and be Star Warsian instead of Star Trekian. Do you guys find those? Did you guys pick up on any of those things? Because again, you guys know a lot more than me.
I didn't really feel that, but I can retroactively thinking back to it, I can definitely see that with Phantom Menace having just opened and Attack of the Clones being on the way when this movie came out. I think the impact of Star Wars coming back would have absolutely had to have had some kind of minimal to large impact on how they were writing Star Trek. I can't remember when Insurrection came out, and I think in 98, didn't we say? So it's been 4 years, and between that in that time, you've had Star Wars come back and literally, break the bank at the box office. So like you're kind of competing with, as far as most nerds are concerned, your prime rival in the science fiction genre. And that's in addition to all the other fantastic movies coming out in 2002 and 2003. So I'm sure there was a little bit of like, we need to capture some of the spectacle that Star Wars brings.
Right. Because
Star Trek has never really been about spectacle.
Right. And it wasn't even just the Senate aspect. I mean, and it wasn't even like the Phantom Menace, in my opinion. Like the whole car chase scene, while I did find that enjoyable, it reminded me of like various pod racing scenes in Star Wars. The people at the beginning who were chasing the little dune buggy that came out of nowhere reminded me of the Sand People from the very first Star Wars. Okay. There were just a lot of elements as far as like look and the way they acted and the way they felt on that planet. That whole beginning scene just really felt like it was picking like, okay, this is very Star Warsy. This is familiar. This is familiar. Let's put all of these little pieces in there to kind of make you feel like it's Star Warsian, but like make it Star Trekian.
I was gonna ask another question about like, why is it that Star Wars has this sort of fan appeal, even though Star Trek has been around longer than Star Wars, but Star Trek just it teeters off. Like you can't like it has Star Trek has a dedicated fan base, but when it comes to their movies like are nothing. And maybe that's it. Is like Star Trek is purely for television, and Star Wars is purely for films.
Mhm.
My question
That's my opinion. Is I think that the general masses feel like I've never seen any of this television show. Why would I go see this movie?
Yeah.
And look at me as that prime example. I never have seen any of these movies. I've seen some of the TV show, but not TNG. But because there are so many seasons of Star Trek, even though they're connected but not connected, I feel like I haven't seen any Star Trek. So why would I go see these movies that star, let me caveat that star the people from the TV show, the J.J. Abrams Star Trek, those were successful because they are not connected.
They started over.
And
they're better.
Fresh. It's the same reason that I don't necessarily get into comic books really, is because if I start on volume 123, I feel like I've missed 122 volumes that are important to the story. And that's why I feel like these movies that star these people are not as successful as like the J.J. Abrams ones who reboot everything. And I don't need to see the TV show. I can go see this movie and not worry about the previous 17 years or however many seasons they have. I don't have to worry about that.
I would say in terms of the long term, because like you said, Star Trek started in 66, right? Star Trek started 3 years before the moon landing. As a franchise, as a intellectual property, and then had a long hiatus until the 80s, except for the films that were coming out. And the films were hit and miss in terms of interest level. But I think even until, I would say right up until midway, like through season 5, season 6 of Star Trek, between 4 and 6, somewhere in there, Star Trek was still very niche, very cult. Like, this is all pre-internet, stuff like that. The thing about Star Wars in comparison is that Star Wars was like a big event. It was like, it's credited as being one of the first movies to be an event film. It is for kids, it is for adults, for whoever wants to go see it. And the benefit of, if you want to catch up on Star Wars, take you a couple hours, 3 nights, and you can be caught up on Star Wars. Like Star Trek, like where do you want to start? Where do you, and you're talking about, this is the 10th film in a franchise spanning 4 different television shows. Like, there's a lot of investment there, and there's tons of content that if you're genuinely interested, you could watch an episode of Star Trek every day for like 2 years, and then start the movies. Like you can do it however you want. Star Wars is much more is way more accessible, and is something that I think appeals to children even more than Star Trek does. Even though Star Trek clearly appeals to tons of kids at a certain point. But
they do.
It's just the accessibility of it.
They do 2 very different kinds of science fiction. Star Trek is honestly the anti-Star Wars in a lot of ways, and it's a little cloudier now. But if you go back originally, when these 2 movies came out, I mean, Star Trek the motion picture came out just a few years after Star Wars did, kind of in response to Star Wars in a bit of a way. Movies like Star Wars and Close Encounters of the Third Kind of were like showing people that sci-fi is maybe cool again. So you watch Star Wars and you're like, oh, this is cool, I want to see more space stuff. And then you go watch Star Trek the motion picture, and you are probably going to be very disappointed if you're expecting anything remotely similar, because it's not that kind of sci-fi. It's like, I'm obviously I'm not comparing this in the way that it's going to sound like, but Star Wars is like your action adventure sci-fi, And Star Trek is the motion picture is more along the lines of like 2001: A Space Odyssey.
And the early Star Trek movies is the level of like action and energy those movies have. The first Star Trek movies, like I would say all the way up until even Nemesis, they treat space battles like submarine battles. It's just like slow fire torpedoes when ready.
Yep.
We missed. Fire again. Like it's just the slowest way to have
and
combat.
Star Wars is out there with showing you dogfights.
Yeah, and like they're doing dog fights in space. It's so much more action oriented. And so the new movies, like it opens up with like things blasting everywhere, explosions happening, big action, big excitement. The spectacle is there. Those early movies didn't have that much spectacle. The reason Wrath of Khan is so well beloved is because it's so intense as a character like interaction. You have these two dynamic personalities going at it, and they like something. We'll get into this another time, but Wrath of Khan, the antagonist and the protagonist never meet face to face,
right?
And yet they have this intense interaction throughout the film. But it doesn't make for quite as exciting. Like it's a totally different kind of way of appreciating a science fiction film. I've always called Star Wars more science fantasy than science fiction because it's so outlandish and it's so far beyond even what it could even be considered plausible science fiction at times.
Star Trek is a lot smarter with their stories. And just the way they do things in general. It's not, I don't want to call Star Wars lazy because it's not. But if you're going to compare the two, they don't really get into the nuances in Star Wars like they do in Star Trek.
No.
They play to that building of the world in a factual based way, whereas with Star Wars, it's more of this is just accepted, deal with it. We're not going to really explain it, whereas Star Trek really kind of gets into the deep nuances and the world building, and that's just two different philosophies on how to build this world.
Well,
exactly.
Well, and the other thing is about Star Wars is that Star Wars kind of goes around other genres,
right?
Like it goes around. You could easily compare Star Wars to, say, samurai films or even westerns.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And I think that's where that appeal comes from. And I think that's where it's derived from.
Yes.
Whereas Star Trek, what?
No, go ahead. I'll
Star Trek is just completely, it's like pure science fiction and it's thematic elements. It's very deep stuff.
Cut these both to their core too and look at what they're about. Star Trek is about a advanced form of humanity, exploring the universe, known and unknown, and bringing peace wherever they can. That's an admirable storyline that is fun to watch. Now look at Star Wars. It is about an oppressed people fighting for freedom from a tyrannical empire. Which of those is more relatable to people? Everybody
kind of cut out there. What a tyrannical what?
Star Wars is an oppressed people fighting up and rising up against a tyrannical empire.
Mm-hmm. Well,
which of those two is going to be more relatable to people? People are going to feel more
sense, in
Star Wars.
Even in a more like micro sense or macro sense, I'm not sure which the right term is there. I think macro sense, micro sense. Star Wars is about a very simple hero's journey. You start with young child, learns that there's more to the world than he even realized, goes on an adventure with his mentor dies, he ascends to the next level to defeat the ultimate evil, right? That's your like basic story beats. Star Trek is about, here's a group of culturally diverse people who have learned how to share space and interact the way that all humanity should. And here they're going to frequently meet with people who are attempting to break that sense of unity with new ideas. And here's how we will continue to maintain despite the idea or despite the confrontation of new ideas, old ideas, what have you. Like Star Trek is supposed to be much more of an analogy of humankind's growth, whereas Star Trek is very much Star Wars is very much a more singular story about how one individual overcomes a hero's journey, an arc, if you will.
Yeah. All right. Well, I have while I enjoy talking about this far more than Star Trek Nemesis specifically, we should probably move on toward wrapping this up by switching to talking about how big of a box office failure this terrible, terrible movie was.
Let's do it. So Star Trek Nemesis debuted, as Josh said, the weekend of December 11th, way back in 2002. It finished number one with a 3-day total of $22 million, which by 2002 standards is not a very high finish. So hang on here. If we look at the weekend for Star Trek Nemesis and what it was going up against, it was a very difficult time to release. So Star Trek actually opened number 2. I said number 1 a second ago. I apologize. Star Trek Nemesis opened number 2. Oh, I guess I have these all wrong. These are my insurrection notes. Sorry.
What are you reading here?
Number 2. Sorry, excuse me. It opened number 2 with an $18 million haul, just $200 million, or just $200,000 behind Made in Manhattan.
Ooh.
In the number 3 spot with $12 million, you had Drumline. At number 4, you had Die Another Day, James Bond film. At number 5, you had The Hot Chick.
Wow, what an awful lineup of movies.
I know, you remember The Hot Chick?
I do.
Yep.
The only good one.
It's me, Jessica.
Drumline is the best movie on that list, if you're going to be real. Drumline's not that good.
And the thing is, so
Die Another Day.
here's the truth of the matter. That was not necessarily the stacked lineup, but here's what was also going on at the time. A month earlier, Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets released, and it was the number 6. Let me pull that page up again. It was the number 6 movie that week, and its 5th weekend made $6 million. So you have Harry Potter's big sequel. 1 week after this, guess what opened up? Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers.
That's what I was going to think.
So you have James Bond's 20th film. You have the second in a powerhouse trilogy, The Lord of the Rings, which we reviewed earlier this year. And you have the second Harry Potter film debuting a month before. It was a packed holiday weekend or holiday, and basically everybody made the decision, we're probably not going to go see Star Trek.
Yeah, for the people who marketed Star Trek to release it at this point in time was stupid. The winter timeline is for movies that are, in my opinion, pretty big blockbusters still. To an extent, you have some blockbusters. This movie is not that. It should have been released at a very different time, September.
That's right. So Star Trek Nemesis would go on to make $43.2 million in the United States. Over its run, you add $24 million from international, brings its worldwide total to just $67.3 million, which is a very, very low finish. Going back and looking at 2002 on a whole, Nemesis. Let me adjust this to in-year releases. The highest grossing movie of 2002, as you guys might remember, is Spider-Man. Then you have Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers, Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, and My Big Fat Greek Wedding. Those are your top 5.
Wow.
Nemesis would finish quite low down in the number, where is it here? There it is, the number 54 spot. Just above a movie called Reign of Fire, which is a lot of fun. I like that movie.
Wow.
And
That's my
right
impression
under,
of Andrew.
and right under
Great
Big
movie.
Fat Liar.
Oh, Big Fat Liar.
So your highest grossing non-sequel that week, Spider-Man, highest grossing sequel, Two Towers. We've been over this before. You can go check out either our review of the Sam Raimi Spider-Man films or Lord of the Rings for more on those. And then finally, what else? Oh, so I want to take a quick look at Star Trek, the series. So this is unadjusted for inflation. So apologies for that. But for the series of Star Trek, Nemesis is quite far down towards the bottom. As you might imagine, the most recent films by J.J. Abrams are the highest grossing. I think adjusted for inflation, the motion picture and Wrath of Khan rise up there pretty high. But Nemesis, unadjusted, is right at the bottom. Star Trek the Motion Picture is right down there with it, not bringing in very much. I'm sorry, that's its re-release. Anyway, I'll need to take better notes next week. I thought I had taken care of all this, but I apparently did it wrong. Anyhow, overall, the highest grossing Next Generation film is First Contact. And yeah, it never really captured it from there. Nobody went to see this movie, and they didn't continue the franchise. So,
Dang.
Overall, not fun. I forget who is running the letterbox game this week.
It's you.
Well, it's you, but I remembered a quick fun fact that this is mostly for Andrew because I think he'll get it better than. I mean, y'all will get it, but he'll get it. So Nemesis, the screenplay, was written by the same man who wrote Gladiator, The Aviator, and Hugo.
Yeah.
How did he write this shithead?
Don't know. Have no idea. This must have just been like one of those things where it's just like, we're just gonna put his name on there.
We all make mistakes.
Like John Logan. John Lovitz.
He's the lone credit. He's the only one who wrote this screenplay. The story was developed by other people, but he wrote it.
When I saw that credit, I'm like, man, this guy has written so many good movies, and he's also a winner of Best Play at the Tony Awards, and so he's got decent. He can write. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. It's just for every win there's a loss, and clearly this is a loss.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. I have the score ready to go here. So for those of you who may not have watched this before, the Letterbox game is where we go to Letterbox, the very popular film community site / app. If you don't have it, try it out. It's a lot of fun. You just pick movies, rank them, give them your own ratings, give your own reviews. And luckily, it doesn't really divide reviewers, like critics and fans up. You're all in one pot, and so everybody's opinion is more or less weighed the same. Right now, in our overall scores, I'm in the lead with a whopping 5 correct guesses so far this year. Everybody else is tied at 4. So, Star Trek Nemesis, where do we think it falls? Just shout out your answer when you're ready.
2.2.
2.2 from Garrett. Low 2.2.
I would go with 2.0.
2.0 from Andrew, going even deeper.
2.4.
2.4 from Josh. Normally, in a case of a tie, we have a few different tiebreaker options, but luckily we will not be needing a tiebreaker this week. The winner this week is Josh with 2.4. The actual score on Letterboxd, 2.6.
Oh, that's too high.
I don't know. I think that makes about as much sense as anything else. 4 people have put this in their top 4 movies.
That's more than Insurrection.
In their favorites.
That's not right.
So let me look here. I wonder if I can do this. So 2.6. First Contact, we went back and looked, was a 3.6. So a full point lower than First Contact, which I believe is the highest rated of these. Generations was a 2.9. So most people ranking it under Generations. And then Insurrection was a 2.7. So big drop off, like not that big of a drop off from Insurrection as far as most people are concerned.
Terrible.
That's it. So what are our personal rankings?
1 star.
1 star from Garrett.
1.5.
1.5 from Andrew. Wow.
It's a 1 from me too, dog.
Whoa.
It's bad.
It's a horrific.
All right. Well, allow me to drag our terrible score up. I'm going to give it a 2.5. I think that I think it's a little bit thing than Insurrection or Generations, and unfortunately, I have to give it a big downturn because I just don't feel like, as far as they should have made it, a better movie could have been made. So it's overall just disappointing.
Yep. Well, our final So Many Sequels score for this movie is going to be a 1.5.
That hurts my heart.
I'm sorry for your heart.
It's at least a 2.5, but all right.
Nah, it's bad. And that 1 star, that 1 I gave it, that's for Admiral Janeway. And you know what? And a little bit for the corner of Wesley Crusher's head that you get to see in the wedding scene.
Yeah. If you watch the deleted scenes, like we talked about, there's a full little moment with Wesley Crusher that's worth it. And we do. Hey, you know what? Some of your 1 stars should go to the fact that they put Guinan back in.
That's true.
Little Whoopi Goldberg.
That was nice.
They put her back in.
That
and
was
they
nice.
never saw her again.
She'd been married 23 times. That's a lot of times.
That's a lot.
Okay. Well, that ends our Star Trek series for this particular round of Trek movies. Someday, hopefully, we will return to Star Trek in either the original series films or the JJ verse. Hopefully, we get there one day. But you'll have to check out our social media channels. Follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Just search So Many Sequels in all those places to find out what we're going to do next. We will spin our wheel of sequels.
Sequel.
And you'll find out on social media what we're going to do next. We don't even know yet. We haven't done it.
Nope.
So go do that.
Nope.
And that's it.
Forward to it.
Until next time.
Face the final frontier. These are the voyages of the Star.
Well, he kept talking, huh?
He did, yeah. He kept going.